You can't get out of it now, Jim.
So we talked before a little bit about the origins of Get Smart, especially that you met Leonard Stern backstage and you had worked with Mike Marmer and Stan Burns. So it was all starting to come together for fate to bring you to become Siegfried. How did you know that you could do a German accent? A nice Jewish boy from Brooklyn to do a German accent.
I think, you see, well, as time went on, all of a sudden, people of Latino extraction got political, and they said, no, nobody does. Nobody acts Latinos but Latinos. And I respect that, and I defer to that. But this goes under the heading of television has changed so much, because back in the day, you could do whatever was available. As a matter of fact, on the I guess I can say it. Paul Henning did these shows that the industry called shit kicker shows. Beverly Hillbillies, Petticoat Junction, Green Acres. I did all three of them. Yippee! And I had great fun. And in one of them, I played an Indian. Well, you can't do that anymore. And I defer to that, and I say that's fine. But those were available at the time because they pay writers a great deal of money. And if you could do the lines that the writers wrote and you could do them clearly, you could do anything. But of course now you cannot do it, and that's fine. But this is what it was back in the day. So there it is.
So do you know how Siegfried came about in terms of how did they brainstorm that there'd be this presumably ex-Nazi working for chaos, that he'd be German? Do you know his origins, how Mike and Stan came up with him?
I really don't know, but they needed someone. In the first year of Get Smart, they had a dog. Well, the dog couldn't be too much in opposition because you always need them. You know, when they did the Lucy show, you learn about the menace. What is you need the menace so you could overcome the menace. So a dog wasn't much of a menace because they lick you to death and all that. But they needed someone to oppose Agent 86. So Germans are always fair game as far as doing that accent. So when Leonard Stern said, he said, come into called me, he said, come into the office. He said, can you do a German? I said, does the Pope wear funny dresses? Of course I can. So I did it. And it was great fun for me, but I was just very brave with that attitude. And I have to laugh when I think about it. Our biggest problem with Don and Barbara and myself was not cracking up because it was so outrageous. The time when I had all of the control agents all lined up, I had them in prison. Prisoners of Camp Kichikuminuniwawa, you have been whipped, beaten, starved, maimed, and tortured, and now the picnic is over. So that was great fun for me, and it worked out. It was acceptable, which I said, God, I hope this is going to be acceptable. And in the submarine, I had captured Don and Barbara again in the submarine, and we were chasing the American 6th Fleet, and we wanted to get into position to send a torpedo and blow up the ships, plural. And they were dropping depth bombs, and my men were getting very nervous. I said, you will not panic until I give the order to panic. And a depth bomb came very close and shook up the whole thing. Prepare to panic! So a lot of this came out of the moment. And you know, to change a line, you had to, of course, pass it by the writers and the producer. But some of the things worked out fine that happened on the set. And I have a picture. There was an on-set photographer, just like there was on the Jack Benny show, when Don and Barbara and myself, somebody must have said something funny, and the three of us were just cracked up. So that was indicative of the joy that we had doing that show, and the joy, the respect, and the fun. It wasn't as bad as when Don Rickles did the show, because he and Don Adams were great friends from the stand-up times, and they would fart around like it was nobody's business. And first we lost Don Adams, and now we lost Don Rickles. So there's really nobody to replace these icons. And it's sad in a way, but in a way that's history. That's the way it goes. I spent some time with Don Rickles, a delightful, gentle, caring, considerate human being, and he got his comedy from his father. There was something in that generation where people could lovingly do little spritzes and little digs, and it was fun, little sarcasm, but as long as behind it there was some loving feeling, some gentle feeling, and that's where. But he, you know, there was a fat Jackie Leonard, and Jackie Leonard said, Don Rickles stole my act. Don Rickles stole my act. Well, Don Rickles did not steal his act. He got his act from his father, but he amplified it. And I saw Don Rickles at Reagan's second inauguration, when Washington was freezing. He could barely breathe. And he took on the cabinet, he took on Reagan, he took on Schultz and everybody else, and he was beyond brilliant. And this was off the top. And he was adored through all of his life, and he reached the age of 90 and cashed it in. But whenever anybody in show business dies, and I go to my phone book and I write, on location. That's how I put it.
I like to think of it that way. That's
on
nice.
location. Yeah.
Did you base Siegfried's accent off anyone in real life that you knew? Where did you come up with the specifics for doing that accent?
Well, okay. It was different from what Sid Caesar did with it, because his German was a sort of a guttural German. And I was very fortunate. I was going to a shrink who was from Austria. Now, the truth is, when Europeans learn English, they will invariably learn it from a Britisher. So there would be just a bit of a British accent along with the German. So I stole it from the shrink, and that's okay. He didn't know.
Profitably, you stole it. You stole well. You stole from the best.
Yeah.
And I presume you'd never played a character before who ended up with a catchphrase. You ended up with "This is chaos. We don't shush here."
Yeah.
How did that catchphrase come about?
I don't know. It was written, or it just came from someplace. I don't know where. This is chaos. We don't shush here. Or when Starker was and then Siegfried takes off in the airplane and he goes, do. I said, Starker, this is chaos. We don't do here. So that became a catchphrase.
Did people request it of you at the time when you would, at the time, if you'd run into people who would recognize you, was that catchphrase so well known even then that they would ask for it?
Oh yeah, and I do these autograph shows. People say, "Oh, would you write that? This is chaos. We don't this and that here." I have one in Memphis coming up in June. But people will love the Siegfried thing more than they do the Love Boat thing, although they do love the Love Boat thing. But you know, at the same time, okay, so one day, Davis. What the heck was his first name? The man who was producing the Marlo Thomas show at a certain time. Anyway, okay, so he says, Bernie, let's go to lunch. So I go to lunch with him. I was already committed to to Get Smart. So we have a nice lunch, and after the lunch, I thought, well, thank you very much. I thought that was the end of it. I was ready to go home. He says, no, come, take a walk with me. So he leads me into stage 8. And I would say, boy, I love the stage 8. This is where I did the Dick Van Dyke Show, where I played a Mexican divorce lawyer, because Rob and what's her name were having marital problems, and they were just thinking about a divorce. So they went to Mexico, and I was the divorce lawyer, and it would sound so complicated that they decided not to have a divorce. So he takes me into stage 8, where the Marlo Thomas show was ensconced, and there's a whole circle there of Marlo and all of her writers. And he said, Bernie, do the pilot. I do the pilot, and I do the Schwartz, and I was asked to play Jerry Bauman, and I said, I'm doing Get Smart. I can't do both of these. I said, I'll have to do one or the other, and it became this scary thing. I said, oh, gee whiz. But I found a way to do both. I got very friendly with the ADs, the assistant directors, the guys who made up the schedule. And I could call them up. I said, hi, Bill, I'm doing a Get Smart on Tuesday and Thursday, so the rest of the week is open. So. And it worked out. For 5 years, I never had a contract with either of them. How did that happen? And I got to do both of them, sometimes both in the same week. Lucky, schizophrenic, but lucky.
And on a purely recurring basis, right? You were never a regular on either. Now, and so before that conversation with Jerry Davis, I just want to...
Jerry Davis.
Sorry,
back. Jerry, up in heaven.
Go back to a little bit of Siegfried, because I want to talk about Jerry Bauman, that girl character, afterward. But Siegfried's look. Now, you mentioned you were 33 when this break came. So Siegfried, if you do the math on him having been in World War II or whatever, was quite a bit older than you.
There was never a reference to having been in World War II.
Okay. We assumed it, though, didn't we?
Not necessarily. He was just that Nazi mentality.
Okay. But he was older than you. Siegfried was older than you.
He was older than me,
and
so
look.
we had fun with the gray hair and the Heidelberg dueling scars. Hurt like hell. They had liquid collodion. Collodion. We had a brilliant makeup man, Ray Sebastian. He would apply the collodion here where the Heidelberg dueling scar would go, and it sort of sucked in the skin. And it was, taking it off was painful. Keeping it on was kind of painful, but it really sold the fact that there was an indentation in your face. After a while, I said, please, let's not do that again. Do it with makeup. So it would make with a dark, and then there was a white thing on the side of it, and that was believable. But the liquid collodion really was perfect.
And Siegfried had a mustache too, I believe.
A mustache, yeah, to cover these darling lips. It was low on the lips, so it really looked like an authentic thing. And after a while, I grew a mustache, but my wife doesn't like facial hair, so.
Well, it was a transformative look. Siegfried looked very different.
Transformative look.
Yes.
Good writing.
Yes. And what was Siegfried's relationship with, what was his relationship like with Maxwell Smart? They both seemed so incompetent in the same ways. It seemed like they were almost made to be foils for each other.
The relationship somehow was viciously friendly, or some kind of insane thing. I would capture him, and then he would get away and evade the capture. But it worked. And then the first one was so brilliant. We had the exchange of weapons in the first one. We met in the park, and the attitude was supercilious. I know more than you know. And we had the exchange of weapons. So we take out one weapon out of this gun with the numbers and the letters, this gun and that gun, and there was some other gun, some other guns. He said, "Is there anything else?" I said, "Well, yeah. I have the suicide ring." "The suicide ring?" I said, "Yeah. My wife said if I ever take it off, she'll kill me." So that was the joke that ended that. But Don allowed me to get away with, like if you have to get away with getting a laugh. It just turned out to be very, very lucky. And Mel did not cast me because he was very busy with silent movie.
Mel Brooks.
But it was Leonard who cast me. Let me go back to something with Leonard Stern. And this is an indication of showbiz. Lainie Kazan said, to be in show business, you have to learn how to fall in love with the word no. So Leonard, before Get Smart, he calls me into his office. He had in mind, he had to cast me in something. He said, I have this show, Run, Buddy, Run. Do you think you could play Buddy? He handed me the role of Buddy in Run, Buddy, Run, like the star of the show. So for 6 or 8 months of my life, I'm having power lunches with David Susskind and Dan Melnick and Leonard Stern. We're going to Scandia, we're going to Perino's, we're going to all these places. I said, boy, this is great. So at the end of 8 months, I'm in New York, my father was sick, and I get a call to come into the Talent Associates office to see Dan Melnick. And I'm waiting for 40 minutes outside the office. I said, gee, I'm fantasizing. They're going to start early with Run, Buddy, Run. So he said, Mr. Melnick, we'll see you now. I come into Melnick's office. He's on the phone. He said, Harry, this will just take a second, okay? Okay, hold on. He said, sweetheart, you're out of the sketch. I'm sorry. So go home. He said, take a nap, have a drink. I'm sorry. He said, yeah, Harry. I was dismissed. So this is how you can really get damaged if you have a fragile ego. It was just so appalling that happened because I believed this glorious thing for all the. But I think within a year or so, Leonard said, can you do a German accent? And that worked. But I mean, how can I speak to youngsters in the business and say, you got to have leather skin, you have to be, you have to take no for an answer and still survive, because some things can be heartbreaking. But hang in there for the goodies. Hang in there for the goodies, and that's one of my mottos is hang in there for the goodies, because sometimes it is glory. It's a privileged business. I say this to young people. I say this to anybody. It's a privileged business. Better for me than driving a taxi. Better for me than being a stock boy, and all the other caca jobs that I experienced.
Talking about Leonard Stern, what was he like? You ended up working with him as a director on some other projects.
Oh, yeah.
It was a fruitful friendship. What was he like as an executive producer on Get Smart?
Leonard loved talent. He would go to see plays, and he would use people that he found in plays. He loved theater, and to me, he was a great mentor. He was my great friend and leader for 47 years of his life. And he was very elegant, very elegant. And I remember Katrina, my wife, once went to hug him, and he sort of shied away. And what I found out later on was that Leonard Stern's father was a landlord, and he had to go to collect rents from various people. And he was collecting rents one day, and the man knifed him to death. So Leonard had a thing of not getting too close to people in general, but he was very loving and very giving. And so he used me in any number of things. In '66, on a little break from Get Smart and the Marlo Thomas Show, Talent Associates was to do Death of a Salesman, CBS special, with the original cast of Lee J. Cobb and Mildred Dunnick. And I was cast as the boss's son who fires Willie Loman. I said, oh my God, I'm going to be working with Lee J. Cobb, this preeminent tragedian of the American stage. And when I fired him, the power of this human being was so frightening. When I had this attitude, I saw that he was no longer capable of representing the company, so I had to fire him. And I fired him. I said, "You can't fire me," with fire coming out of his eyes and voice. I said, I was afraid for my body. But he was this brilliant actor, and he and Mildred Dunnick had a relationship that started back in the 40s. She had this attitude of, she said, "Lee, why is it that after rehearsal, I reach a point where I set my performance and it's exactly the same every time? And with you, you add nuance and new impulses. How come? Why is that?" And he said, "Because, Millie, you're a lousy actress." Well, they had a loving relationship, and he was just poking fun. But even to me, at one time, he said, "Mr. Kopell, do you have an affinity with the sea?" I said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Because I noticed you were fishing for your lines." But that was his personality. And tragically, when he had a very serious heart attack, he was a gambler. He pissed his money away, and he had no money to pay for his hospital. And Frank Sinatra paid his hospital bills. So Sinatra, I spent some time with the chairman of the board, and thank God he liked me. Don Rickles said to him, "Frank, you look a little down. Hit somebody, you'll feel better." But Sinatra was a great hero of mine. And in '85, I was fronting the Desert Princess, Pacific Princess, Desert Princess. And because I played a lot of tennis in Palm Springs, they made me the spokesperson of the hotel. So there I was with the pictures of me with the tennis racket, my wonderful hairpiece. Hi. So Barbara Sinatra calls me one day at the hotel. She said, "Bernie, I represent the Coachella Valley Foundation for the Abused Children of the Coachella Valley. We'd like to do a telethon at your hotel," my hotel. I said, "Well, that's great with me." And she said, "I'll tell you who'll be there. And Frank will be there, and Sammy will be there, and Bob Hope will be there." I said to myself, "Woo, I don't know if I could handle this." So I had a Thanksgiving tennis event, and there was a rumor started that Frank Sinatra's going to be here. Frank Sinatra's going to be there. This was before the telethon. And I said, "Oh, gee, I better." And I remembered a Merv Griffin thing. He made a joke about Sinatra. I said, I'll do that joke. Okay, so I said, Sinatra is there. I see him sitting in the back looking kind of judgmental. And I said, "Oh, gee." So I said, "Why is Frank Sinatra always in the company of kings and princes and heads of state and premiers, because even those people need someone to look up to. Got a tremendous laugh. And I said, Mr. Sinatra, would you please stand up? And I saw his face smiling. He likes me. I'm saved. So that began my relationship with Frank Sinatra. So I could tell you stories. I don't know if they're not really, some are not really printable. But is that okay to do that anyway? Oh, hey, take it easy. Boy, what are you, with the mob? Anyway, so I'm playing tennis with Giovanni Brascia one day at Dick Van Patten's court. And Giovanni, he had a dance act, Brascia and Tybee. They had a dance act, and they opened it one time for big stars like Maurice Chevalier. He says, Maurice Chevalier was a stick in the mud. He never wanted to socialize or anything. He says, but Sinatra was just so great to work with, to work for. One day we got this job in some place in Texas. And Sinatra sticks his head into our dressing room. And he said, hey, kids, you want to go to the fights? Yeah, we'll go with you, Frank. It'll be great. So they're in a limo, and they're driving 90 miles an hour through these roads in Texas. Woo! A cop pulls him over. He doesn't know who's in the car. And he starts to write out a ticket. So Frank rolls down the window, and he says to the cop, hey, punk, get the fuck away from this car. And the cop realizes who it is. And he said, oh, sir, I beg your pardon. I hope I haven't disturbed you in any way. Excuse me, please. You have a wonderful evening. And Giovanni said, you know why Sinatra could do that? Because he had the government on one side and he had the organization on the other side. So whenever you get stopped by a cop, pull that. Hey, fuck, get the fuck away from this car.
I don't think I could pull that off.
Chicken.
Well, it's hard to follow a Sinatra story, but I wanted to ask you about King Moody, who played Starker. You mentioned him before.
King Moody, a lovely, lovely human being. He and his wife Rachel Rosenthal had something called Instant Theater. Back in the early '60s, I had a relationship that sort of went south, and I was feeling so terrible. So I said to Rachel and King, I said, can I just stay over at your place tonight? It turned out I was there for a year. And they were people of the earth. They had pussycats, they had dogs, they had all kinds of animals and wonderful, giving, loving people. So King had played a Russian on Get Smart. And they're looking for a stooge for me. They're looking for a helper, someone I could push around. So I said, King Moody. So Arnie Rosen said, oh, no. King played a Russian. He can't play a German. I said, guys, look, on the Marlo Thomas show, Arlene Galanka was my first wife. We had a big ceremony. And then she was unavailable, so they brought in Carol Ann Daniels. They put a blonde wig on her. And then she was unavailable, so they brought in Alice Borton. On a certain level, it doesn't matter. So I sold them the fact that King could be Starker. King was a lovely, lovely human being. His Achilles heel was his parents told him, never show anger. What they didn't realize is if you hold it in, it corrodes you. And that's what killed him. He was a beautiful guy, but he was always, everything is okay, no, that's fine, no problem. He never showed anger. But you got to let it out somehow. You know, and Laura Huxley showed you there are certain techniques. Hit the mattress, kick something, don't hurt another human being. And sadly, we had such a good time because we were great friends. So we rehearsed and just got it the way we wanted it. And then he died. He died too young. But I tell that to any friend of mine. If you get angry, don't just hold on to it, because it's not healthy.
Did you have much interaction with Mel Brooks and Buck Henry, the creators of the show?
Mel Brooks, I had more interaction with Buck Henry. Because Mel was busy doing a silent movie. But Mel came by one day, and he's asking. Now I got 2 kids. I'm a late starter, so everything is great. But at that time I had no kids. So he's asking, "You got kids? You got kids?" He said, "Bernie, you got kids?" I said, "No, I don't have any kids." He says, "Read the manual. Read the manual." he and Annie had come back from Europe, and so we're all, just being around Mel. He's so brilliant. So he'd come back from Italy. So he was in Florence, the soul of art in Italy. I said, "Mel, what was the greatest architectural achievement you saw in Italy?" And without missing a beat, he says, "Carlo Ponti's elevator shoes to permit him to kiss Sophia Loren on the lips." Awesome to come up with this, but that's Mel. And he talked about working on a show of shows. He said, Max Liebman hated me. He threw lit cigars at me in the writer's room. Can you imagine that? He would always be coming out with things that maybe didn't seem acceptable or workable at the time, but were brilliant. But he was this like a little kid from Brooklyn, another Kaminsky, Melvin Kaminsky. Big stretch to change his name to Brooks. But at that time, any hint of ethnicity was unacceptable.
Particularly Jewish ethnicity, or any ethnicity?
Any. Jewish, Italian, Perry Como was okay, because Como could be, oh, there's Lake Como. It doesn't have to be. But I didn't know until I talked to some Italian friends of mine that Italians back in the 20s and 30s were regarded as lesser people. They were the bricklayers, and of course that was just disregarding the great opera people. So how that happened there was always ethnics fighting against each other. So, oh, Italian, please. The garlic eaters. That was even in a movie that Lionel Barrymore said that. The garlic eaters. Unfair, and didn't make any sense. So, I don't know where that.
Well, you had talked about Mel Brooks's real name, but I wanted to ask you also about Buck Henry.
Buck Henry, in his own quiet way, was there for the. I came in the second year, the second and third year, and then he went off to do The Graduate. But we had Arnie Rosen, Arnie Sultan, Mike Marmon, and Stan Burns. But everything is on the page. Everything must be on the page. The brilliance of these comedic guys. Arnie Sultan grew up with Buddy Hackett, and he said, "Yeah, Buddy Hackett, we called him the brain because he knew everything. He knew medical things. He knew astrology, astronomy. He knew so much." Buddy Hackett was a brilliant guy. He was also Buddy Hackett also. We were in Fort Lauderdale on one of these tennis things again. Buddy didn't play tennis. He had difficulty getting around with his weight. We were telling jokes, and Leslie Nielsen was there also. So Buddy loved to tell jokes, and a whole group at this hotel in Fort Lauderdale gathered around. So I told some jokes, and Buddy was telling jokes, and Leslie was telling jokes. So some civilian started to tell a joke, and Buddy said, "Stop, professionals only." So he was very serious about, and he had this weight problem. So he got himself in a weight losing program at Duke University. He lasted about a half an hour. But just to assert himself, he got steaming pizza and shoved it on the doors of the other people who were trying to lose weight in this very stingy program. But that was Buddy Hackett.
Do you have a favorite Get Smart episode that we didn't already mention?
Oh, I loved them. I loved them all. Schwartz's Island was brilliant. The submarine, Rub-a-Dub-Dub, 3 spies in a tub. I told you about that. They were all just wonderful for me. Just very, very happy experience. And Mel and Buck Henry and these brilliant writers that I mentioned. Now, what about the Marlo Thomas show? The Marlo Thomas show, Marlo was a gem to me, because as soon as I came on that set, and I think some other actor had the role, and she was not happy with that actor. It was Dabney Coleman, who was a brilliant, brilliant actor, but he didn't really fit into that show, and he had a great career aside from that show. I fit into it because it was New York kind of a thing, okay. And she was appreciative of what I was doing, and Don Hollinger, Ted Bessel, he and I became great friends, and we played tennis together, and he kept saying, did you go to Daly's? My eyes are too close together, aren't they? I said, no, you're fine. You know, actors are always worried about this stuff like that. His eyes actually were a little bit close together, but that was okay. He was a good guy. We had fun. But he was always concerned about his eyes, and he didn't know where he was going. And he became a very good director. And then he was misdiagnosed with something, and he died because of the misdiagnosis. So not all doctors are wonderful.
I want to get into that girl in more depth in a minute, but I just want to finish up some Get Smart. You reprised the role of Siegfried a few times after the run of the show.
Yes.
In 1989, there was a TV movie. 1995, there was a brief Fox network revival. How did you feel about coming back to Siegfried that much later?
It was never the same. It was never the same, and I loved working. And Dick Gautier, who recently passed away, he played Jaime the Robot. And Dick Gautier had some kind of an attitude that they'd make him an offer, and he said, no, they're insulting me. Now, he played Birdie on Broadway, and I just assumed that they passed him by and got this other guy, Jesse something, who was not very good, and it might have worked out for nicely. Now I understand the truth of it was they made Dick Gautier an offer, and he said, no, they're insulting me, and it didn't work. He always had this thing that they're insulting me. So for Get Smart again it comes up. Now, he was my friend, I said, why aren't you doing this? He said, they were insulting me. I said, Dick, we'll have a good time. We always have a good time when working. I mean, I had to come back at him about 3 or 4 times. So he said, okay. And then he enjoyed himself. But he had that strange fixation that maybe it's paranoia, I don't know what, but sadly, it didn't work in his favor.
But you didn't feel that the revivals were held up in terms of being as good as the original show?
They were not as good, and even Don said, he said, we used to have these great fights, you know, the great stage fights. He said, and now we're fighting over the world. So it's like, and he knew that he was getting older and I was getting older, and so it really it did not work well. It was nice to try, but then you say, you know, don't do that. Don't do that.
What do you think is Get Smart's legacy?
Get Smart's legacy is I go to Australia and people are still loving the character. I sell more pictures with this chaos we don't shush here as Siegfried, and I go and I grow a mustache and I do a little dueling scar and they say, oh, Siegfried. It's one of those strange, happy experiences that I love. And I don't know, I'm very lucky with that. But to say those lines, the really Buck Henry's lines and Mike Marmor and Stan Burns' lines made me a very happy guy, still.
And it's interesting that another role you played when you were in Lancelot Link's Secret Chimp. You played Baron von Butcher. It was a 1970 comedy series, and it really had echoes of Get Smart in that as well, but it was done with chimpanzees.
Well, Jim, the way it worked out is you start with James Bond, and then you go to Man from U.N.C.L.E., and then you go to Get Smart, and then Mike Marmor said one day, he says, let's do it with monkeys. Okay, so we did it with monkeys. So we never actually spent time with the chimpanzees themselves, but they were led through these actions. So how do you make a monkey talk? Well, it's not that difficult. Some like peanut butter. Some like chewing gum. So there was one thing where the monkey had this thing where it goes on and on and on and on and on, and then it was like a big yawn afterwards. I said, how do I deal with that? He said, okay, I think I know. You will not oppose me in any of this. You take what I tell you and you do it exactly as I say. So it fit into the lips, but it was just silly.
But it was right after the run of Get Smart. Were you consciously echoing Siegfried in doing that character?
Of course. And I was Crito, the Indian chauffeur, and just silly. But we were giggling. It was the same guys, Mike Marmor and Stan Burns, did that.
Well, now let's talk that girl, and I know you started to talk
sure.
about it. So you were playing Jerry Bauman, as you said, who was a neighbor of Anne Marie's. You started in 1966, so as you said, during the run of Get Smart, and you were juggling it all. Tell me about Jerry. Did you have input into who he was and what happened with that character over your many appearances?
Jerry Bauman was a newspaper man, and he worked in the newspaper with Don Hollinger. And they had scenes in the office, and also to enrich the show, the producers put Jerry Bauman and his wife, the very changeable wife, living next door to. So we were the married couple in opposition to the unmarried Anne Marie and Don Hollinger. And that worked out fine for 5 years. And oddly enough, and Marlowe was just such a gem. As a matter of fact, when I did this play in New York, we started out in Calgary, doing this brilliant play called Viagra Falls. Can you imagine that? Viagra Falls. And then we went to Mississauga, which is a suburb of Toronto, and then we did it in New York. Mistake. To go to New York with something as light as that, but Marlowe came to see it with her husband, and she was just so sweet. Even then, although she's somewhat disappointed that she was the star of this show, and now she's not the star of the show, so it was good, always good to see her. She's a great supportive friend, and I wish something really exciting would happen. But she's busy with St. Jude, which is a beautiful thing that Danny Thomas started, and she's involved with that. But I'd like her to do something bigger, because she got accustomed to being. She was the star. She was the co-producer. She was the co-writer.
Which is, again, Anne-Marie on screen was a pioneering female character.
Absolutely.
And Marlo off screen was pioneering in being an executive producer and being as involved as she was. How was it? Were there differences in working with Marlo the actress versus Marlo the producer? How did that work? What was she like in those capacities?
Marlo, she was the head of the show, and people poo-pooed her being the head of the show because they said, "Oh, sure, her father bought her the show," which is baloney, because at the same time, Danny started a show, like a redo of Make Room for Daddy, and it didn't go at the time. So you can't buy a success that determines that people are going to watch it. It was her show. She directed the whole everything of the show, and it was her, and she was the first independent woman. She wanted to be an actress, and people said, "How come?" You know, she may have the character may have achieved getting one role, maybe. How did she get to wear these gorgeous outfits? And I would have to say to people, "Hey, this ain't a documentary; it's a romantic fantasy." That's how that happened, because it's television. You know.
Do you have any favorite memories of shooting that girl?
Yeah. When Alice Borden was my third wife, who was the same wife. We're shooting a film. It's like Ted Bessel and Marlo and I are shooting a film, a low-budget film, and we're all excited. And the camera goes a little bit this way, and we see my wife is in conversation, and it seemed to be a very intimate conversation with a man. I was like, is she having an affair? Oh no, this is so horrible. And it turns out that the man was her gynecologist, and she was pregnant. Now, strangely enough, she was actually pregnant during the show. Her daughter, Claudia, was in her belly when we were filming that. So that was so sweet. And she tells me at one point that she's going to have a baby. And I get so excited. I said, "Oh, you smell so good." It's just so sweet. She smelled so good.
Was that you saying that to her, or Jerry saying that to Ruth?
It was Jerry saying it to her, but at the time I didn't have any kids, and I was just so excited that she was pregnant. But talking about not having any kids, I eventually, in my 64th year, Katrina and I made a baby. So that was great. And then in my 68th year, we made another baby. So that was so great. And I said, "Wow, look at all this great stuff that's happening to me," and I so appreciate it. But there's a negative to that, where sometimes my 14-year-old has said to me when he was going to the Wilbur School, he said, "Daddy, please do me a favor. Don't call me through the fence." I said, "Why?" "Because the kids make fun of me because you're so old." I said, "Well, I'm your father." He said, "I know you're my father, but don't." The kids gave him crap because he said, "Your father looks like you're like a grandfather." So I said, "Okay." So I just sort of stay off to the side. But I got to be a big shot in my home when the kids saw me on The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. "Daddy, you're on television." So that became something.
There are two sides to that coin.
Yes. So that was great. But the kids loved Get Smart, and they would do scenes there was one scene where Snoopy Smart and the Red Baron, where I would drop poison on the on the crops. I was going to ruin the potato crop, and so we would do scenes from that back and forth
With your kids?
with the kids.
I love that.
With the kids, yeah.
How did you learn that That Girl was coming to an end?
Okay, how did I learn that That Girl was coming to an end? Marlowe, and you don't see this too often in show business because people want to go on ad infinitum. Marlowe said, "How long can I keep saying, 'Oh, Donald'?" She said, at the end of 5 years, it turned out to be 1971, she said, "That's enough." So that was she chose to have it end, and also talk about money. Here's something where there's a difference between from 1 year to the next few years. She came in the last year, she stood on a chair, said, "Everybody listen, please, I just had a meeting at ABC. Our show's been picked up in syndication for $7 million. That was tremendous. So Danny Arnold, who produced it the last couple of years, he did Barney Miller. So when his show was picked up for syndication, Columbia gave him $22 million. He said, "This is bullshit. There's much more coming to me," and studios have this marvelous reputation of doing this to actors or producers or directors. So he spent over $1 million for 3 years fighting Columbia. They came up eventually with another $33 million. So that was, what is it, 54 million. Or if we got the numbers right. So Danny was a character. He was in the Army. He benefited from the GI Bill, but he went to Trancas. He said, "Let them find me." He was in Trancas, and they didn't find him because they didn't know where he was. He wrote for Jerry Lewis, but he was also very compulsive. He had me saying one time, there was a character I was referring to by the name of Morton Futterman. Morton Futterman. He said, no, say it with that certain New York thing. I said, "I think I am, Danny." He said, no, say Morton Futterman. I said, "I like Morton Futterman?" This went on and on and on, Morton Futterman. Eventually, the first take was just as good as the 800th take, whatever that was. Anyway, Danny wanted to save time. So he got this great idea. He said, we can use a valuable time that people go off to lunch and they order something and they have to wait till it's served, and it's served, and they have to run back, and it's a waste of time. He said, "I'll order the sandwiches." He didn't tell anybody about this. "I'll order the sandwiches and the tea and the coffee, whatever it was, and I'll have it sent so people who want a break, it'll be right there." He did that, but he didn't tell anybody. So lunchtime came, everybody runs out, and they go to a nearby restaurant and order stuff, and they wait, and they come back, and all these sandwiches. But Danny, in his compulsion, had eaten about half the sandwiches himself because he was compulsive. Danny Arnold, but he was a lovely guy, had the greatest head of hair I've ever seen on a producer. And eventually he died of a massive heart attack. But he was brilliant in his own way.
What do you think the legacy is of That Girl?
She was the first independent woman on television preceding Mary Tyler Moore. And the legacy is girls love any reference to the Marlo Thomas show because some wanted to be actresses and some wanted to be independent as well, not just, I mean, when I first came into television, the wife's role, the woman's role was, "Hi, sweetheart, more coffee?" or go to your room to the kids, or something like that. But it changed enormously. Where the shows today have women who are independent, they are heads of corporations, they are lawyers, very, very busy in worldly matters. We almost had a woman president. We're not going to get into that. So it's a changed world from the world when I entered television to the current world. Where the world has changed, so television reflects what is going on in the world. You have all these women commentators. You watch CNN. You watch 60 Minutes. You have the ladies. There are equal amount of ladies, and you watch what's going on in Fox, where the ladies are standing up on their hind legs and saying, "No, this guy is harassing us. He's doing bad things to us." And you have the whole Cosby tragedy. Women are standing up for themselves. Yay, women. My wife, as a matter of fact, has said to me in no uncertain terms that she is the alpha in our relationship. I say, oh, crap. I said, why belabor the obvious? I know you are. You know you are. Why announce it? I don't have to hear that. So, yeah, so there it is.
Well, and speaking of another woman beloved in television, and who, in her way, certainly changed the role of women in television, I want to get to Bewitched, because you did 6 appearances on Bewitched, as we're talking about great 70s TV. Tell me about your memories of doing Bewitched.
Bewitched was so happy. Everybody had a crush on Elizabeth Montgomery. Everybody had a crush on her. She was delicious. She was provocative. And I loved Bill Asher. Bill Asher was like, who was that? Who was the producer and director of Frank Capra? This was Frank Capra, and Bill Asher was the head guy of Bewitched. Frank Capra would call, there was this marvelous character actor, Charlie Lane. Charlie Lane lived to be 100. He worked with everybody. Charlie said, oh, God, Frank Capra, God love him. None of this audition crap. He'd call you home, hey, Charlie, how are you? How's the family? Everybody all right? How's your golf game? Good? Now, Charlie, I'm doing this film with starring Jimmy Stewart, and I'm doing it, and it gives him the date, such and such a date. He said, I'd love if you have the time, if you're available, could you play such and such a part? He said that was so respectful. And Bill Asher was the same way. He'd call, hey, Bern, how you doing? How's your tennis game? Good, it's fine. We got this part of a 100-year-old apothecary. You think you can handle that? I said, yes. Actors are so full of it. They say yes before the question is even out, because they don't want to be turned down. Yes, so I played a 100-year-old apothecary, and that was great. Can you play it? Yes. So for a number of years, I got to play all these marvelous characters, and there was one time, he said, do you think you can play yourself? I said, come on, Bill, you know I can. So this lovely girl who was on the Carson show, Carol Wayne, was my girlfriend, and she had been a bunny, but she had been, through witchery, she had been transformed into this luscious girl. So Bill was casual about just about everything, because it was a party all the time, and everybody's looking at Elizabeth like, ah. And so there was Paul Lynde, very uncomfortable guy. Paul Lynde and Carol Wayne and myself, and Carol Wayne had to make this circular thing around the table, and she had come from the forest where there were bunnies and beavers and deer and all of that, and she loved them because she'd been transformed from a bunny. So something happened every time. She didn't quite get to the place where she had to sit down. And the first time, Bill Asher was a little annoyed. This happened like 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. He said, Carol, for God's sake, all you've got to do, you got to come around the table and say, and you love everything in the forest, and you come in and you love this animal, you love this animal, and you sit on your beaver. That's lunch, 1 hour. We could not control ourselves. But that's what, and there's one time, it was a Friday night, and it was very late, and Carol sort of had this, that thing that Carson liked so much, and she said, have a wonderful weekend, and she holds on, and says, what the heck is in her hand? She drops a joint into my hand. I said, oh, thank you. She said, okay, bye. She tragically drowned off the coast of the coast of Manzanillo, Mexico, in a few years. So that's not a happy story, but before you get to the end of it, it's happy.
And that episode, you played an advertising client of Darren's, I believe, who falls in love with Carol Wayne, who is literally a transformed bunny.
Yes.
Yes.
She was a bunny. We had there were 2 Darrens on that. Dick York was the first one. I think I got his name right.
You did.
And he was marvelous. But he was a veteran. He had some serious back problems, and he was taking the morphine or some kind of a serious drug. And after a while, Bill Asher said, we can't do this anymore. And they brought in Dick Sargent. Dick Sargent, God bless him, was not as good as Dick York. Dick York? Yeah. So that's when I came in. But Paul Lynde was such an uncomfortable guy with his life choices. We always had to watch out for, like a Christmas party. I said, uh-oh, here he comes. So when we did The Flying Nun, he was on it and I was on it. And I always want to get a rise out of him. I said, hi, Paul, happy to see me? And he said, no, with that strange, uncomfortable way he had. They said he had so many citations for driving. He said it would be less expensive if he would get a chauffeur to drive him around wherever you go. But and Agnes Moorehead on Bewitched, I had seen her on Broadway in Men and Superman with Charles Laughton, Charles Boyer, Sir Cedric Hardwicke. And she was the lady, she was the only lady, and I'd seen her with these Orson Welles films. And sometimes she played a bitchy lady, and I said, how is she going to be like to deal with? She was lovely and very complimentary. She said, not all actors can do what you do, going from one character to another. And she said, oh, that's so marvelous. Oh, sweet. But
because you played 6 different characters, I believe.
Yeah.
Including Postlethwaite, the apothecary, on it several times on a recurring basis.
Yeah. And then the hippie with a big blonde afro. Yeah. So Bill Asher was a delight. And then he did another show. He and Elizabeth divorced. One time Elizabeth says to me, she said, Bernie, you want a drink? I said, with you? I said, ooh, yeah, boy, hoo-hoo. So I went into her dressing room. We had vodka and soda. And I said, yeah, I'm really having a drink with Elizabeth Montgomery. This is so nice. She said, want another one? I said, yeah, great. When I was not thinking clearly. I had more to say in the afternoon. And I said, oh, I'm a little sloshed. Is this my last day in the business? But I pulled myself together, and I was okay, but I never drink, no matter who invites you. Anyway, eventually she ran off with Dick Michaels. She had that seductive gene, and then she ended up with someone else, and then she got sick. This is a tragedy that that keeps happening, like on Love Boat. Well, I don't want to get into that right away, or should I?
No, we'll wait for the Love Boat.
We'll wait.
Yeah,
we'll
because
wait.
boy, we have a lot to say about that.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Well, let's take a break here.
Okay.
And then we'll come back and talk. We'll come back in the mid-'70s.
Very good. Very good.